I am black. I am gay. I am disabled. I am a woman.
You could honestly just half the armor stats of all current armor types in this game and make the regen 4 to 5 seconds without getting shot for all armor types. They could even change how segments work, so instead of losing all that armor together, it just takes longer to regenerate. So instead of 4 seconds, now it's 8 seconds, or even a full 20 or 30 seconds for heavy ballistic to severely punish reckless play. I really wanted to experiment with different deployables, but for what they were at launch, they just didn't feel worth using. The one I really wanted to try the most were ammo bags, because they gave the player the ability to restore 2 grenades for each charge, and that was a huge buff that just made sense instead of adding a separate deployable that just did that with no possible way of upgrading it. What the fuck was the point of adding in the ordnance bag from the last game? Someone please tell me. Even for the nice change that ammo bags provided, there was already a way that allowed you to find grenades just by picking up ammo since launch. Sadly, for what it's worth, ammo in this game is easy to replenish. So much fucking ammo. With specific ways of funneling ammo without ever taking the risk of getting your health mowed down. Foreshadowing is a narrative device in which the storyteller gives an advance. There's also the fact that the damage boost that you receive from the skill like High Grain wasn't really that noticeable versus something like an infinite mag double barrel. I mean, compared to having an increased damage to having an infinite mag for a couple of seconds, you tell me which one you think is better. Foreshadowing is a narrative device. I'm gonna be perfectly honest, I fucking miss Bulletstorm. One more thing that makes ammo in this game very abundant, that is something that I wouldn't really notice unless you told me or if I looked it up, but ammo in this game is actually player-sided instead of server-sided like it was in the last 2 games. Server-sided means that it's first come, first serve, so if you're the only person that picked up that ammo box, then nobody else is allowed to pick that one up. But player-sided simply means that the same ammo box that drops from one unit appears on every other player's instance of the game, meaning every player has a chance of picking up that same ammo box with no real downside besides walking over to pick it up yourself. The ammo that you do get overall can definitely be self-sustaining already, even if you were the only one on your team spending ammo. And with a single damage buff to hit most thresholds in the game, it's almost hard to even lose ammo unless you're intentionally missing or not even walking over the ammo to pick it up in the first place. And there's already a method for you to be able to pick up ammo without ever needing to walk over there to pick it up. Foreshadowing is a narrative. I think it's been less than 5 minutes and I already ran this joke into the ground. Now there's one more thing I forgot to mention about ammo in this game. I say ammo is very abundant, but that's only really a half-truth. Client-sided ammo drops still existed as early as launch, so if you were playing with other people, it was still possible to maintain everyone's ammo pool. But from my own experience, only really being able to get matched up with 3 bots in almost every lobby I joined before they added in a quick play option, I've been putting most of the legwork of taking out the enemies, so most of the time my ammo is struggling to even stay close to the starting ammo count. The bots barely even make a difference in terms of damage and only are really there to take away enemy gunfire away from me. Even then, ammo bags were still pretty useful, not because the player can drop them, but it's because if you run low on ammo after an assault wave, the bots just drop them for you instead. I will be going more into detail about the changes they've done into Payday 3 in my next video, but for the sake of keeping the topic with ammo changes, right when the Fear and Greed DLC dropped, that being the last one in 2024, multiple changes were made to the game that made ammo go from being a little scarce to very abundant. With these changes, I rarely ever have to take out my pistol for combat now, with the only exceptions being the same exact ones I would pull out the 5.7 pistol in the previous game. Ammo bags really went from being promising to just nothing after one update. And if you think ammo inflation in this game is bad, then you've never heard about what happened to the Federal Unemployment Tax Act. For more information, look up FUTA inflation in Google Images. I think sentry guns in this game are great, and I love just placing these down without ever having to worry about sacrificing a huge portion of my reserve ammo like the last game. But with how punishing the armor mechanic system was, or maybe still is, and when turrets do eventually break down, having to get out of cover to pick them back up just to redeploy them just takes too much time. And investing into the skill points to make them better is still pretty expensive. Thankfully not as expensive like the last game, but with how hard it was to get XP to unlock more available skill points, you had to to be content with running skills that don't benefit your overall survivability just so that your turrets can stay up just a few seconds longer. Turrets in Payday 3 have received the least amount of balance changes out of all deployable options since launch, with the only two direct changes that they were given was just being able to pick them up quicker while they're not overheated, and giving them an outline to better see where they are on the map just in case if you forget where you placed them. But surprisingly from my own experience, I felt like turrets were made considerably better over the first year of this game's lifespan. Besides health and armor being more abundant in future updates, the real reason why they got better was probably because of the maximum skill points that you could unlock increased from 21 to 28 in April 2024. Which aside from the mastery skill, you could max out the entirety of the engineer branch with an already decent build made before the max skill point increase dropped. Even when you had to work with 21 or 28 or even less skill points altogether, because honestly, I think no sane person enough wanted to grind up to level 100 with challenge-based progression. Okay, you should know me by now. There is a considerable problem that happens when you invest a large portion of your skill points into something like the turret skills. None of the turret skills do contribute to the main buff system that almost every skill tree has. I'll go into detail about the skills in this game eventually, don't worry, it's not gonna take as long as me uploading a new video, alright? Trust me. When the fuck did I get a new desk? But the worst deployable in this game that you will never see anyone run unless they're maybe doing a stealth build was the medic bags. I perfectly understand that medic bags in Payday 2 were the meta, but the nerfs that they received in Payday 3 was just so over the top that I feel like someone just gave a list to the dev team saying what the medic bag provides and then just stripped everything away that made it good in the first place, just basically killing off its actual identity. The medic bag by default didn't even restore a down when used. Instead, you needed to have field surgery as an invested skill to get a down back. But even then, it only works on the person who has the skill, so you couldn't at least try to be a team player if your main reason was to bring them to restore downs in the first place. The description itself at launch was just false advertising. And the healing you get out of just one charge from this thing isn't even enough to bring you back to full health. It's almost like a glorified first aid kit, but you have to drop all your charges instead of just a single one. And to top with the fact that you don't restore any downs while using this, I can't believe I'm saying this, but the medic bag needs a medic bag! I know I'm probably being a dead horse by now. I get it, I'm still focusing on one problem with gameplay, and you're probably done hearing me rant about it. Don't worry, I still got a couple more in the back. One more problem that affected every deployable that you could bring that wasn't the turrets at launch was that you could only bring one of them per heist. Having that one deployable is something that Payday the Heist did, and you at least had the armor necessary to try and maintain those resources until maybe halfway or near the end of the heist when you need them the most. And for Payday 3, I can't tiptoe to get those resources if the one that I needed in the first place was the armor necessary for not dying. I feel like I'm demanded to drop my armor bag the moment I hear that fucking glass breaking sound telling me that all my armor just broke. It's the same exact sound I hear now also whenever I shit my pants. And I know that there's a skill like Deep Pockets that exists now that allows you to split your deployables into two bags. But a skill like this and many other skills that were quality of life changes didn't exist when the game first came out. There was nothing strategic about resource management in this game. The changes to the core gameplay elements from the previous game was just infuriating to deal with. But just to wrap up how bad armor really was at launch, here's just a short clip of the average zero armor experience and how it was like for the first 6 months of this game's lifespan.
No match for me! Get fucking pissed!
Oh fuck.
That won't stop me! Those
I just wanted to know how something like this just looked okay in a gameplay perspective in a PvE game, because I feel like this just happens way too often within my personal experience playing this game. I feel like the gameplay overall just wanted me to feel like one of those whack-a-mole games running on high voltage every time I just wanted to peek in and out of cover just to take out one enemy. This is a genuine question I have, but was the game actually properly playtested for the average player experience, or did every single playtester just get a max level account just to test out the game?
Foreshadowing is a narrative device. No, Daddy, please. I was only following your program.
I'll make that deal. How about you, you bitch? You make that deal?
I'd make that deal.
I don't blame you. Damn good deal.
A professional doesn't need to kill those.
Hostage trading have received so many different changes from the previous game that it definitely had a lot of potential being good even from the very start. When you weren't trying to make every civilian an unwilling participant of your own space program, or turning half of the trained police force into war criminals for defecting on the side of the robbers like in the previous game, the only good thing a regular hostage was able to do was to get a player out of custody at the end of an assault wave. Hostages now have 3 new gimmicks that seem very interesting on the surface but have their own problems, either being underpowered or underdeveloped. From how I see its original implementation, I feel like it's some kind of safety harness that was originally meant for players that wanted a both hybrid, stealth, and loud build. For starters, when the alarms go off for the heist to go loud, first responders will show up before the first assault. You can trade civvies for about 10 extra seconds to hold off the first assault wave, and after every successful trade, you need to trade more hostages to extend the negotiation time even further. And with how boring some objectives are, especially when they require you to wait out in the open with little to no cover, I thought this was already a great addition, even though I don't have any negotiator perks to make it any better. But the only problem with negotiator time is that it can end immediately if you either shoot an unsuppressed weapon,
They're coming in 30 seconds.
shoot at a first responder,
More cops on the way.
get close to a first responder,
30 seconds until they hit you.
shoot your hostage,
Police assault incoming. 30 seconds.
or even pass a specific heist flag.
More cops on the way. They're
And
in
it's not
30
factoring
seconds.
final assault triggers are prioritized over negotiation time. So if you were to secure too many bags and fuck up last minute, then the experience you would have is very similar to fucking up stealth last minute on death sentence in the previous game. Or if you're unlucky enough, you can soft lock the entire heist from progressing. Wait, what?
Cover my ass while I'm getting out of here! We know that you're in there! You are surrounded! We're in charge of this situation! Come out of there, unarmed, with your hands on your hips!
What?
Get a move on! I need help!
Hostage rescue
I'm
units
so
are on
confused.
site.
Okay. I do take damage, I think.
They've raised the fucking bollards. Lower them or the van won't be able to get in.
The van was already here, what? We triggered the van, what the fuck? God, Nick. What happened? I know this might be going a little bit off topic, but I've had multiple times where I would just complete No Rest for the Wicked on stealth, only for the alarms to go off last moment just for the game to never progress to the heist end screen. I've had similar moments happen on other heists too, and I'm surprised that a 10-year-old game was capable of transitioning stealth to loud without the game possibly shitting itself. But going back to negotiation times ending, it's something that the game doesn't even bother telling you that could happen. This is the only thing that Shade says whenever first responders arrive.
If you tie down the civilian, I have something to bargain with.
I even scrubbed through a lot of my early game footage just to find this one example, but even then, all of my footage from 2023 never had Shay tell the player that hostage trading was an incentive. She just never said anything. I don't care if the argument would be,
It's just common sense not to do these things.
since when does every game started using common sense?
You have the hands of a healer. Ooh!
And even though I did pick up throwing away negotiation time maybe within like the first month or so, it still pisses me off that it could just take one teammate to ruin it, either without knowing that information, or just doing it intentionally and wasting hostages that can be traded after the first assault wave. After each assault wave, those remaining hostages that you still have can be traded in for resources instead of negotiation time, but the only available resource was just first aid kits. And like I said before, it wasn't going to impact your overall survivability if your main resource that was getting attacked first was your armor. And first aid kits not only didn't heal you for much at all, not only did they not have the ability to grant you overheal when you use them like now, but it didn't even have some kind of broken property like restoring any available downs. The more powerful armor repair kits were added 3 months after launch, but even then, it was only able to repair an already damaged chunk. It couldn't refill a broken chunk until a new skill was added a couple of months later. And the worst part about trading for resources was the fact that you couldn't move those resources after the hostage was traded. The final thing you could do with hostages was probably my favorite thing that I will go into more depth into the next section, and that's grabbing them and using them as human shields. You will move slower and only be restricted to your secondary, but because SWAT units don't want to harm the hostages, they will be less likely to shoot the player, especially if you use the hostage to block them from your point of view. But besides some secondaries that may outperform in terms of damage, some units will try to charge you to knock the hostage out of your hands, leaving you stunned. Even if those units spontaneously lose every single brain cell to charge you like the smartest Fire Emblem Green unit, without proper skill investment, I could see why meat shields may have been a turnoff for a lot of people.
You just can't deny it. I'm better than you are.
Now, just like armor, the skill tree system has been completely reworked, so many of the issues I will be talking about may not exist anymore, but I still feel like it's important to highlight the problems that existed for the sake of documentation, especially when many of the issues existed for almost 2 years. Now, out of all the problems I have to do with the gameplay for Payday 3, I'm willing to argue that this is probably one of the most subjective takes I might have to the game. Compared to the 120 skill points that were in the previous game, you only have 21 to work with in total. Of course, that's if you manage to get up to level 100 with the old skill-based progression system, and I'm already being like negative talking about a new subject of gameplay that I barely even touched upon until now, so I at least want to go over the positives with the skill tree system first that I personally liked from the start. See guys, I don't choose violence all the time, just most of the time. Although you don't have many skill points to work with like in the previous game, each skill that you invest into now only costs 1 skill point. And a lot of the skills that you can invest into now have more of an impact, like the chance of getting reusable grenades so you don't have to use an ammo bag or rely solely on the maximum amount you can bring. One pretty good example of how impactful these skills are that I can think of is using something like Solid in the Enforcer skill branch. Using a human shield by default will force some enemy SWAT units to approach you to stun you so you drop your hostage. But what if I told you that the interaction changes when you're incapable of being stunned? Would you like to stop sucking my dick? Wait, I couldn't get out of the corner, what? What's the game plan? Another good one that I personally find funny conceptually, just investing in a social engineering for stealth just to steal in broad daylight.
Perfect. Don't take another step, pal! Get down on the floor!
If you wanted a perk inside of a specific skill branch, you have to invest into the first perk of that branch. But at least you're not mandated to invest into so many fuck-off skills that you just don't want in your build. There's even a final skill that each branch has to offer that doesn't require you to invest into the first skill, but instead you have to be more invested into the perk branch itself. When you complete your first heist in this game, you can see that this game has skill progression. You can unlock each skill branch chronologically, or you can select a specific one you want to research if there's a skill in that branch that seems interesting. I'm sorry, I'm just having internal thoughts right now. As long as you at least have 1 skill point invested into that branch, you can gain access to new perks. But investing more than 1 skill point doesn't change the amount of XP you gain. This means you don't have to put all your eggs into one basket. Theoretically, you can unlock multiple branches at once as long as there's 1 skill point invested into that branch. So this is a hot take, but hear me out. The fact that they have to slowly introduce the player to how each skill branch works is all influenced by the player themselves. You are not restricted playing either stealth or loud, but if you're interested towards a certain play style, then you as the player can attempt to unlock those perks that you want sooner. Even if you did settle on a build, you probably would have some spare skill points left over, so you can use them to unlock more branches that may have more skills that may favor your playstyle even more. I was able to unlock every single branch in just 1 week of gameplay, and I could probably argue that this is the only good progression system they added to this game. And that's probably all the positives I can really say about it, because there's just one overarching issue in the skill tree system in Payday 3 that I just don't like. And I'm back to being negative again. Most of the skills you unlock in this game aren't really considered to be passive skills, instead they're considered to be active, requiring you to make certain actions to do in order to activate these skills so that you can get the benefits out of them. The first one is Edge, giving you a 10% damage bonus, and any skills that use Edge increases your overall offense. Grit decreases the damage you take by 10%, while the skills that require it are more defensive instead. And Rush increases your... You know what, let's just say 10%. I'm too lazy to fucking do my own research for this. With the 3 active skills that you can build up, they only last for a brief moment. Because of this, a large portion of your skill investment would have to be allocated towards having to maintain the uptime for these perks as much as possible. The system put into place for trying to maintain the uptime for these buffs just feel disorienting at best. Most of my time, instead of being dedicated towards doing the actual objectives, is just trying to do a checklist to see if I meet all the requirements to keep playing the game without eating shit.
I hope the bitch appreciates the trouble I went to.
Many of these skills seem very useful on the surface, but because they require the respective buffs in order to activate, it makes no sense to me why they couldn't just give you like a diet version of what these skills are supposed to do without their respective buffs. Why couldn't they make recoil handling half as effective when you don't have Edge? What about quick reload? It requires you to have both Edge and Grit. Why can't that just increase your base reload speed when you have none of these buffs active, while it slightly increases it more when you have one of them? These aren't the exact numbers to increase those stats, these are just examples. But why don't most of these skills just give off an exact number for how they work? How much faster is my reload speed supposed to be? How does hip firing spread decrease? What is the exact number in movement speed increase with Rush? Why do you show me that with Edge and Grit, but you don't show me that with Rush? There are skills in this game that give you an exact percentage of how they get increased. Why are many of the skills in this game just left in ambiguity? I mean, look at this. Cutting Edge increases your AP, but by how much? I don't know, but... AP turrets just tells you. What is the purpose of this ambiguity? With how I invested into the skills in Payday 2, I knew exactly what I was getting. Imagine if you're investing into the overkill perk in Payday 2, and all the game just tells you is that if you kill an enemy with a shotgun, you gain a damage boost for a brief moment. Okay, great. How much does that boost my damage? What do you mean by a brief moment? How long is a brief moment? What do you mean Mocha Mint's not your favorite iced coffee flavor?
I mean, that's fine. I just don't like iced coffee.
Where do you live? Is there anyone else that lives with you? Do you feel safe in your own room with the lights turned off?
Where do you usually keep the knife?
Wait, why the fuck is she not fully asleep? Oh my god, I left the mouse cursor on the screen. Let me give you an example of how convoluted it can be to explain the buff system to a new player. When you start out playing this game, you'll probably gravitate towards acing Ammo Specialist because it's one of the early skill trees that you can unlock that gives you an edge buff. And the method is pretty simple, just by picking up ammo when you just don't have it. But this form of gaining edge is one of the few in the game that doesn't also refresh the time limit for completing the same action again. Let me remind you that although you have less skill points to work with, the skills in this game have a much heavier impact in your overall gameplay. But when these skills do require a specific buff, and if that buff isn't active, then you're basically playing the game as if you were just a level 1 character with no skill points invested. And with how demanding Payday 3 is with its gameplay, where one wrong move can force you to take too much damage, losing edge can be a death sentence for some builds. So now you have to find a skill to refresh it too. But some of those skills are trade-off skills, which require you to have another active skill instead. Okay, now I need to find out how to invest into that active skill to swap to that skill to get to the other skill that I need to get into. Do you see what I'm trying to get at here? It gets even more confusing that some of these perks don't seem to correlate well with the progression of each branch. Plate Up is a great skill in the ammo skill branch, which allows you to restore any recoverable armor immediately when you pick up ammo. When you have grit, only for ammo specialists to not have any way for you to build up that grit. This is already like the second skill branch in the game, and it's already underlining a pretty consistent issue I have with the problem with the perk investment in this game, and it's just how confusing it could be sometimes. I mean, here's another one. Look at Escapist. It's a trade-off branch, but there's a progression with how each perk interacts with each other. Basic gives you rush 3 seconds after sprinting, while acing it gains or refreshes your edge while sliding. And if you want, investing into move and cover can trade that edge for grit when you mantle over an object or a surface. I only understood that because I had to carefully read the text that was on the screen. Some skills like CQC Specialist are supposed to give you rush when performing a takedown, but there are no skills that require rush in CQC Specialist. The entire point of Strategist requires you to invest into branches outside of it because you don't build any active perks with it. I mean, sure, the basic premise is to mark enemies, but I have to be invested into 2 skill points to take any kind of benefit in combat, and it only works on special units anyways. The motion sensor is your only way of marking normal enemies, but it only works up to 30 times in total for those 2 charges. Top it off with the fact that I can't even build a buff, and this entire branch is just a turnoff for me. Of course, you aren't restricted on using buffs in specific skill branches. The grit that you get from Enforcer by taking out 2 enemies within close range is the exact same grit that you can benefit out of Plate Up in the Ammo Specialist branch. But as a new player, you probably wouldn't assume that and invest into a skill that you either have trouble building that specific buff on demand, or in worst case scenarios, you wouldn't even be able to build up that specific buff at all. I also have another confession to make. I actually do have a form of dyslexia, so when I read this 4-letter word, all caps, exact color, I just register in my brain that it's only one of the buffs. And in some cases, like Demolitionist, I just register it in my brain as the wrong buff. This skill tree menu was not easy for me to understand as a new player, and even when I had about 200 plus hours to the game since September 2023, I still can't remember the handful of different ways to build up specific buffs without naming like the 3 or so skills I invest into in every build. I know I'm not the only person that complained about this. I've already heard the argument that it would be easier to understand how each skill works by simply color coding the buffs. Like if Edge was red, Grit was blue, and maybe like Rush being green. I've already seen mods like this implemented since day 1, and I've seen Starbreeze change the entire menu layout after 1 year of this game's release, and they still couldn't at least bother to change the pigmentation of the text. And that's just me being petty about how modders did it first. You were not there when I discovered that modders found a way to implement their own server browser before Payday 3 officially added their own. Now, for someone who hasn't played this game before, I know what you might be thinking. Is it even possible to keep constantly maintaining between having Edge, Grit, and Rush up as much as possible? Well, 1, just don't worry about Rush. That shit sucks. And 2, yes there is. There's one skill that makes the time limit that almost every combat skill provides redundant by design, and it only really costs about 1 or 2 skill points depending on your build. Combat Reload is a skill that resides in the Enforcer skill branch, and it allows you to refresh Edge and Grit by simply pressing the R key before that number reaches 0 on your mag. So as long as you know what your method of building up Edge and Grit is, you can potentially keep your uptime for your buffs from the very start of getting them at the heist to the very end. And you don't need both buffs active in order for this to work. You could have either or, and you can still refresh just one of those buffs. So this is where I'm going to start putting out my hot takes here, alright? So I want you to hopefully read carefully between the lines of what I say, but I personally just don't like the point of adding in a skill like this. And not because I want to suffer more in Payday 3's already bad gameplay. I personally like turning off my brain and pretending the buff system is like COVID-19, but to a conspiracy theorist.
Oh, I get it. It's because they don't think it exists.
Oh, actually, you're right about that. Seems like you're finally starting to understand. Now, my big problem conceptually with a skill like Combat Reload was it already being implemented at launch. I imagine that the dev team themselves wanted to play around this 3 buff system, but already didn't feel confident that people were going to like it. And I feel like the devs just slapped this skill into Payday 3 as a failsafe, just in case if the buff system was too confusing or too much to handle. The failsafe in question is just to make combat feel uninterrupted, so both your offense and defensive buffs just don't turn off while you're in the middle of an active gunfight. Another problem that I have with Combat Reload, besides some of the buggy interactions it has with one specific skill. Come on, guys. Foreshadowing. Foreshadowing!
Father, am I a real boy? Ouch. Please don't be disappointed in me.
The method itself forces me to get into the bad habit of constantly reloading my gun after every exchange, and the moment that you press the reload key back at launch, there was no way of canceling it. The only prerequisite skill that you had to get in order to use Combat Reload was to invest into Enforcer Base, which besides it not actually being a nothing burger skill like some other starting skills, it's one of the most consistent ways of building up grit. Now, I don't have a problem with easy grit maintenance. I'd argue that grit, in my opinion, is the hardest buff to build in this game. A lot of it requires interactions between the cops or the civvies. For starters, Enforcer itself requires you to kill 2 enemies point blank within a couple of seconds, no later and no further. CQC Ace builds grit when you grab a human shield, but it can easily be a wasted skill if all your teammates do is just kill hostages in front of you. And this is why I never wanted to play Payday 3 with other people for the longest time. And most of them that did this were just fucking console players. Of course it was.
It seems like you're a console player. I don't really like console players that much. Wheeze! Get the console killer!
Another one of the only few grit skills that you can build on command. Cooker not only required you to still have a throwable left, but this says it only builds the grit, it does not refresh it. While Duck and Cover still requires a surface to mantle over, which it could be very map specific. But going back to Combat Reload, because of how easy it is to just refresh both Edge and Grit just by pressing the reload key, it completely invalidates many of the rush skills currently within the game. Aside from every Enforcer skill that requires 2 buffs to be active, Grit had way too many skills associated that consumed your buff. Out of the 7 skills at launch that only required Grit to be active, 4 of them consumed the buff on proc. Last Man Standing was probably the only exception to this rule for how strong it was. It gave you a few seconds of invincibility and you would survive the attack that would have made you go into bleed out.
Get me down, get me down.
Wolf is downed.
But I had the thing! I had the thing! And of course I still find a reason to hate Last Man Standing. The 3 remaining grit skills are strong for what they can do, but getting rid of your grit also means that you're getting rid of PlateUp's armor recovery. I understand maybe in a balancing reason that they didn't want you to maybe spam these skills like blast shield so you can throw grenades without consequences, but they could have easily made it so that these effects just don't occur within a longer time window. PlateUp already has this kind of restriction in place, so why was this not considered? Grit wasn't just the only buff that had these problems, there was maybe just a few edge skills that were consumed when their conditions were met. And the main reason why I have a problem with these skills is that you're not just losing that small damage boost or resistance that they provide, you're losing half of your build when your buffs aren't active. It's especially worse when most Enforcer skills require both Edge and Grit to be active. I know I joked about Rush being kinda useless on Loud, but I'm still not done beating that horse yet. Rush is kind of the exact opposite, because there's one case scenario that I can think of where you want to lose Rush just so you can get an edge buff. Outside of the possible 10% increase to movement speed, Rush as an active buff was probably the most underdeveloped buff that you can build into base game Payday 3. This is because most, if not all, the perks associated with it are only really stealth-based skills. Some of it could just be very minor, like picking locks or just bagging loot faster, but it makes no sense to me why they didn't opt for some rush skills to increase stuff like weapon swap speed, reload speed, aiming down speed, or even fire rate. They really could have made more Loud loud-based skills for Rush, but they didn't. Now, I'm not trying to imply that there weren't any loud Rush skills at launch, but out of the 14 skills that required Rush, only 6 of them did affect combat directly, but most of them are either redundant by design, or they cost an extra skill point to invest into their basic skill, only for that basic skill of that branch to not really impact what your current build's going for, or even just having alternative options that seem a lot more appealing to play with. And although having a hybrid stealth and loud build in this game is a lot more viable than it is in Payday 2, you can't really control how people invest their skill points when there isn't that many restrictions. If you want to have more success in loud, then it makes more sense to invest into more combat perks rather than stealth, and vice versa. It doesn't even help that the milestone progression even encouraged players to finish heists either before or after the first assault started. So the stealth and loud divide between players was still there. Wait a minute. How are we back here? Rush is very situational to activate to begin with. Well, except for Transporter, but besides that not being at launch, it's just kind of automatic in what it does.
You get the speed boost when you pick up a bag to secure it, like how I get diarrhea after drinking my morning iced coffee.
The best way is Infiltrator, but you have to sacrifice a grenade slot for throwing knives, which if you know the heist is going to be loud or if you're going to be playing on loud, then that means you're going to sacrifice your potential AoE when you need it the most. And when you do think more into it, you can't properly take advantage of the rush buff in stealth because half of the time that it's active, you'll have to answer the guard's pager that you just took out to activate that buff. Fuck. If you still want to gain Rush with a throwable while still having AoE, then look no further than Demolitionist Ace, but this only really works with frag grenades because this is the only throwable that counts as an actual explosion. Also, I'll explain later, but you do not want to use that grenade launcher, alright? The Devil Axe and Fire Emblem is more reliable than this shit. The only skill that you can rely on to give you Rush without ever needing to drastically change your build was using Escapist by simply running for 3 seconds. But under the same skill branch, Swift used to be the mastery skill, and you could just invest into it outright without using Escapist, and it just gives you a 10% flat out increase to your movement speed. So you just never needed to build up Rush in the first place. Trust me, it gets more confusing the further you look into it. Blowback is probably the only offensive Rush skill in this game, and for the life of me, I thought this was an edge buff requirement. Even though acing the Demolitionist branch, the same branch where the Blowback skill resides in, says that it's another method of building up Rush. Can you really blame me for assuming that a skill that deletes enemy armor isn't really considered an edge buff? You have skills that restore throwable when you have edge. You have skills that straight up increase your damage even further just by having edge. You have skills that further increase that damage when attacking stunned enemies, and you even have Edge isn't just the easiest buff to build, but it's also the easiest buff to maintain in Payday 3. So much so that I'm even questioning what the purpose of a buff system was when all I can do is just aim down the sight while not moving, or just swap my weapon and just aiming headshot after headshot just to keep an offensive pressure going. The 10% damage buff might not seem like much on the surface, but enemies will have the same health pool across all difficulties, so the damage boost stays consistent. Not only that, but the damage that specific guns can deal were carefully catered to that 10% damage increase. The Bison revolver being the best example. Besides most secondaries struggling to successfully take out most enemies with more than half a mag, it's practically a night and day difference on how effective this revolver can sweep a gathering of enemies with just a single edge buff. Edge's 10% damage boost on a handful of guns is just enough to push it to deal a damage threshold strong enough to kill most enemies in one shot if you were aiming for the head. And acing Sharpshooter or Gunslinger respectively will just outright reward you with even more edge. Although most of these guns that I will go over have strong one-shot potential, at least they have some notable downsides that stop them from being too overpowered. The VF7S has the fastest fire rate out of all one-shot weapons, but not only does it have the worst reserve ammo and mag size for an assault rifle, but its recoil is just abysmal to handle with if your main intention was to hold down the fire button. The Mosconi is a fucking double barrel. We're shotgun enthusiasts! Of course a powerful shotgun needs to have 2 shots in the bag. What game do you think we're playing here, Fortnite? Oh my god, how is a close range headshot not kill? That is not a fucking mythic. That is a fucking Nerf dart in disguise. The SA, what the fuck did I write for that thing? I mean, the fake abbreviation they could have given this thing already sounds bad out of context. Either way, I'm still gonna continue calling it the SA rifle despite that. I mean, I guess it doesn't fire as fast as the VF7S. And both the 44 and the Bison revolver, besides having 6 shots in their respective chamber, they both have their own notable downsides. The Bison not only has a slightly worse recoil than the 44, but its reload speed is a lot slower too. But the main reason why you would run the Bison revolver is because of skill economy. The 44 itself, although it has a better reload speed and overall recoil, it still needs another extra damage boosting skill to help it keep its one-shot potential when the heavy swats start to spawn. Overall, every one-shot weapon does have their own built-in downside, and even if one specific one doesn't, with its only downside really being the fact that you have to run a fucking marksman rifle.
We're shotgun enthusiasts, of course we fucking hate snipers.
Every single gun, whether it has the potential to one-shot or not, still has to follow the same basic rules of every shooter. Once the mag is empty, you still have to take time to reload your weapon before you can shoot again without exception. You know, unless you were that skill that I was constantly foreshadowing, like... I already know that the dozens of times I mention this skill, some of you have already paused and read the description of it whenever it pops up, so it would just be pointless if I even went over the skill by name. Insert me screaming so loudly that the audio cuts off because I'm too lazy. You know what? You get 1 millisecond. Ammo funnel in this game is probably the Inspire of Payday 3, and that being the fact that it would be basically on every single build you see. What it does is that as long as you have an edge buff, and if you were to pick up ammo while under the effects, that ammo will be fed directly into your active mag instead of your reserve ammo, when your mag isn't full. Now, if a skill like ammo funnel existed in Payday 2, it would already be powerful enough as it is, but the exception would be that its benefit will work on specific guns on specific firing modes too. Now, what I'm trying to say, for an example, acing something like body expertise in the oppressor tree in the previous game was meant to only benefit most automatic weapons, and it allows the player an almost guaranteed chance to inflict headshot damage without ever needing to aim for the head. But if something like the automatic weapon restriction was never put into place, then what's stopping me from going to the sharpshooter tree and using a skill like Graze to give myself the ability of getting just big AoE when I don't even have to aim for the head, by simply just making Graze only work with sniper rifles? And if you try to gaze into Payday 3's skill tree system, every mower skill like ammo funnel implies that the player should be using guns that have a large mag pool and consistent fire rate to take advantage of, like SMGs and assault rifles. Just like how Enforcer was meant to incentivize the player to get within close range, similar to a shotgun playstyle. So just because the skill icon shows you a specific gun type that you're supposed to use doesn't actually mean that you're restricted to only using those guns. So because there's no actual restriction of what gun type you can use, you can run ammo funnel with weapons like a marksman rifle, a revolver, or even just a double barrel shotgun. Now, there's at least one notable downside that I could see while using ammo funnel that was planned in development, and that being the fact that you have to go out of your way to still pick up the ammo that cops drop after you drop them yourselves. This means if you still want to keep a hyper-offensive playstyle, then you need to get out of cover to retrieve ammo so you don't have to keep waiting for your guns to reload while enemies take free pot shots into your armor until the animation is done. I think ammo funnel is definitely a pretty good high-risk, high-reward skill that exists in the game, and what the fuck is that? What the fuck is that?
Money, 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 money.
So every downside that I can list about ammo funnel just gets completely thrown out the window because of this one particular skill. Replenish. As long as you have edge, you automatically pick up ammo dropped by enemies you've killed. And the biggest problem with this skill is that Ammo Funnel was already a strong enough skill on its own. Replenish is just a fucking enabler. They turned armor into a resource into Payday 3, but forgot ammo was also supposed to be one too. A skill like this has never existed in Payday before, where you could just not worry about having to pick up ammo after every interaction yourself. Because there was no actual limit to which weapon benefited from this skill combo, it didn't stop people from finding out the handful of guns that were capable of one-shotting with just one headshot and an edge buff. That's not saying that other weapons weren't as strong. There were definitely consistent guns to use, like the Car 4 and the AK, but taking out enemies quicker also meant that you were taking out the very thing that would have been shredding your armor sooner. It still didn't help the fact that there were better ways of increasing your offense, while there was only a few defensive perks or utility that was available, especially within the early life of this game. Investing into these one-shot infinite mag builds was also fairly cheap. If you're willing to cut corners, you can make an already broken build available with just 5 or 6 skill points. But to reiterate on the two mower skills, Ammo Funnel is probably the most anti-Payday 3 skill because it feels like a skill that would fit right in home with Payday 2. You weren't just being awarded for playing aggressively, but its effects are much more noticeable than any other skill in the game. Replenish isn't just the most anti-Payday skill, but its effects just makes no sense, not just in a gameplay perspective, but also a realistic one too. And I'm not here to say that I'm switching teams and throwing away my previous opinion on how I feel like the game should be, but the implementation of Replenish is by far the most hypocritical design choice when you look at developer intent. It's like on the same level as people saying that they never liked Overwatch, and then you look at their search history and it's just filled with and I'm surprised these ideals weren't just overlooked once before the game came out, but twice halfway into 2024 when they wanted to change it. My next video will go over more into detail about how Starbreeze tried to fix the balancing for this game, but because the backlash from these changes were very unanimously hated by the community, I think I should at least give the Cliff Notes version. Instead of identifying Replenish as the potential problem, or at least asking their community on what skill they should focus on replacing, or if anything needs to be replaced at all, the lead game dev at the time wanted to take Payday 3's most unique skill being Ammo Funnel and change it to the most generic reload skill that theoretically not only works better with only automatic weapons, but will never reach the fastest reload speed without Ammo Funnel's old effect. My final gripe with the perk system in Payday 3 is that for what it's worth, there's a lot of problems with synergy. And I know that sounds a little bit ironic, especially when the entire skill tree system was built around the 3 buff system that was meant to interact with each other in different skill branches. But surprisingly, there's a handful of skills that may cause some type of anti-synergy instead, either because of a built-in mechanic or bug, or ironically, a specific skill in the same skill tree itself. Sharpshooter's main gimmick is that as long as you're aiming down the sight and keep clicking on heads, you'll get a constant and reliable edge buff. But the second to last skill in the branch, Precision Shot, used to consume your edge just by shooting while aiming down. So if you wanted to benefit from both the edge and the extra damage the skill provided based on your scope, then you can never take advantage of Sharpshooter Ace's edge refresh. And although I already voiced my absolute hatred for the medic bags in this game enough as it is, the medic branch had a lot of potential to being good conceptually. Acing medic allowed you to get grit while reviving a teammate, that same grit that you can use for battle medic to give you and your teammate 5 seconds of invincibility. Top with the fact that if your teammate is going to go down in the first place, you'll always have a reliable rush skill to run to them and revive them even faster, in the form of the Code Blue skill. But Triage basically takes the potential 2 to 3 buffs that you can build and consumes them for the worst possible thing you can get in this game, and that's just extra healing. Plate Up and Replenish as a combo can easily be translated to, while you have both edge and grit, you can recover lost chunks of armor after you kill an enemy. But it's easy to forget that the main condition of Plate Up is when you pick up ammo, and if you throw an overkill weapon into the mix, then this might start to get a little bit confusing. While using an overkill weapon, you might lose the ability to regain armor even when you have both buffs active, and that's because Plate Up only benefits the player when they're picking up ammo, but overkill weapons not only have no way of replenishing their ammo except for calling in new ones, but when you go in a long enough spree with a single overkill weapon, you might accidentally max out both your total ammo count for both your primary and your secondary. Plate Up, and to an extent, Scrounger, can never proc if if your reserve ammo is always full. So your effective survivability gets even worse when you're trying to use your most powerful arsenal available. There's a weird quirk that I've noticed with every gun except for a select few. Despite most guns telling you how much their clip size is, you can manage to reload an extra bullet when the mag is full. And this extra bullet can't be fed back into the mag using ammo funnel. And because technically you're not at a full mag, combat reload will actually proc. This isn't exclusive to assault rifles or SMGs. You could use this with marksman rifles, the pump action shotgun, and even the overkill sniper. But the only guns that are excluded from getting this extra bullet are the Mosconi, the revolvers, and the grenade launcher. Now maybe there's some kind of real life implication that's there that you can have one extra bullet loaded into the barrel of most guns. But for them to remove things like laser sights or even different firing modes on the same gun, I highly doubt that there is some kind of real-life reason why this mechanic was implemented. For the guns that don't have this extra bullet, there's a weird bug that happens when you use both ammo funnel and combat reload. If you manage to have ammo funnel replenish your mag while you're still stuck in the animation of reloading with combat reload, you won't be able to refresh edge or grit. Combat reload will only fail if you manage to reload with an empty mag, but the game doesn't have some kind of fail-safe when you're currently reloading a full mag, so it treats a full mag just like an empty one. And I've honestly had this happen to me way too much when I was just using the Mosconi. And I'm under the personal belief that the developers experienced this oversight too. Now I'm going to speed up the background gameplay just for a little bit for the next time I do prematurely reload, just to show you that I did have combat reload equipped. Now I'm not a programmer myself, nor do I have the Payday 3 source code on my lap, but if I did, y'all wouldn't see me for the next 10 years, cause I'd be making the best Payday. Nobody makes the best Payday except for me. I probably should get off this podium before I get shot. But I imagine a fix like this would be easy enough to implement, like changing some part of the code to make it so that combat reload works when your current mag doesn't equal 0, instead of adding some stupid workaround that just makes 3 of the best guns in the game feel more wonky to use versus the other competition available. Gunslinger has the easiest method of obtaining edge, but it's considered to be a trade-off skill, so if you aim down the sight, it takes away your edge. And I could see some kind of reasoning behind that because they don't want you to invest into both Gunslinger and Sharpshooter to have the benefits of both hipfire and ADS skills. But part of me feels like this is going directly against what the dev team said about how the skill system is supposed to work in the first place.
What we want players to do is we want them to kind of look at how they get these buffs from their build and play around that. So for example, the aim down sight skill that says you get an edge after aiming down sight, that's from a skill line that's focused on sniping, but that same edge buff can be used for skills that are also using that buff but aren't related to sniper rifles or long distance combat. So you're basically mix and matching, how do I get this buff from where, and then which skills benefit from me having that buff active, and then you can build however you want.
And besides that, skill investment, in my opinion, felt like it was already a strong enough reason to not invest into both of these branches, because the cost would only really be too much only for you to use Gunslinger and Sharpshooter only half of the time when you're shooting. If you were given a limited resource of something, min-maxing a single playstyle will always be more viable than going for a mixed option. Payday 2 did this perfectly with how its own skill tree works. Just as an example, because you can ace overkill so other weapons besides your shotgun can receive the damage boost, doesn't mean you want to sacrifice the 8 skill points, when you could invest into another shotgun with a different ammo type that could fill in your weakness. That being crowd control, shields, dozer plating, and even snipers, there's a way to build a shotgun to take care of that. Choosing to ace any offensive skill tree can already cost about 25% of your skill points at least, and trying to invest into another offensive skill tree can leave you with not enough skill points to not only make cuts on your overall survivability, but also your ability to support your team as well. The less skill points you have means the less armor or dodge you have available. Less skill points means you can't invest into converts to take enemy fire away from you and your team. Less skill points means no maxed out deployables. Less skill points means less possible ways of even increasing your damage even further with one specific weapon type for a cheaper cost. With how resourceful you have to be to make full use out of your skill points in the previous game, Payday 3 should also follow this same exact rule. The fact that they had to put that restriction onto Gunslinger makes me feel like they not only didn't have enough faith that the players were going to be cautious about their own skill investments, but it feels like the most laziest way of trying to decentivize the player from doing the very thing you don't want them to do. And if I'm wrong and the main reason why Gunslinger was given its downside of just the easiest on-command edge buff, then why the hell does Sharpshooter get away with it scot-free? Actually, come to think of it, Sharpshooter didn't get away with it scot-free, it felt more like an active incentive. When you have to compare with Gunslinger's only other damage boosting skill to not only consume edge, but will never likely proc with the broken combination of ammo funnel and replenish, Cutting Shot is only available in Sharpshooter, and it's the most consistent damage increase in the game, and you don't even need to aim down the sight to get the extra armor penetration that it provides. It just made a lot more sense to go with the Sharpshooter build, especially with the scarcity of skill points. I'm also just baffled that this may have not been considered in terms of balancing, but Gunslinger loses edge while you're aiming down the sight, and that still counts when you're using a human shield, because the only way you can attack with a hostage in your hand is to aim down the sight. And human shields were probably one of the most unique mechanics that was added into Payday 3 that I wanted to experiment with, and when the game first came out, I realized that Sharpshooter was just the better option for me. That, and pairing it up with the Bison Revolver, a grit buff, and the Solid perk, it was probably one of my favorite builds to run. The immunity to stuns didn't just extend to cops, but back then, if a bulldozer tried to kick or charge at you, you were also immune to the damage that those stuns provided. And you know what? I don't even care if an interaction like that wasn't realistic. I think I'm gonna go to my local Target, walk into the Pokemon cards section, and just stand in front of the Pokemon cards to see how resilient I am versus a scalper shopping cart. I really wanted to invest into more CQC specialist skills, but a large majority of them don't actually synergize well with the actual meat shield mechanic on Loud. And that's still not forgetting the fact that meat shields aren't immune to your teammates' gunfire. Even if they were aware of your meat shield, they still might accidentally shoot them while you're maybe just trying to hold off an entry point like a door. And the reason why I bring up the meat shield mechanic in particular wasn't just because of my unique way of trying to traverse through the worst parts of Payday 3's lifespan for like the first 8 months. But there was a particular skill combination that I wanted to play around with. Pin Puller is a skill that consumes grit, and I thought I could use this as a support option whenever I run flashbangs, because not only could I stun enemies and grab one of them, but I could also throw down a smoke screen to potentially lower a horde of enemies' damage even further. But if I ran out of flashbangs and Scrounger wasn't giving me any new grenades, then I thought of investing into Menacing as a failsafe just in case. By default, you can't intimidate law enforcers without this skill like in the previous 2 games, so I thought being able to have a SWAT unit as a hostage would be the easiest way for me to make use out of Pin Puller. But also, when there isn't any more available hostages on the map to take advantage of, I would still at least have some kind of option to still be able to take a meat shield. Only for me to soon realize that Menacing and Pin Puller were the worst anti-synergy skills, because if a SWAT unit has to obey the rules of a civilian, then civilians shouldn't have grenades. So I basically have the ability to crash the entire lobby in hand. Are you fucking kidding me? Are you fucking kidding me? Oh my god. I'm just not allowed to fucking get recording. I'm not allowed to have fun with this game. I'm not allowed to get recording for this game. I fucking hate this shit. I understand you can't account for every possible skill combination, especially when there's about 100 different ones to choose from, but it's really hard for me to believe that skill synergy in this game was properly handled when some of the best perks have some stupid Achilles heel whenever they conflict with other perks. Even though human shields were in Payday 3 as early as the first gameplay trailer, I feel like the mechanic itself was really implemented in just one day. And I'm not just talking about the lack of synergy, but also one specific bug that makes you unable to move when your shield gets shot. Aside from the many day 1 bugs that wasn't patched 2 months later, I just want to conclude that the skill tree system in Payday 3, especially at launch, was the most bland butter toast, peanut butter, chocolate, Coke, rum, EDP cupcake system in place, with build diversity being almost non-existent. There wasn't any alternative playstyles that you could commit to. There wasn't any other option besides running the meta, and actively trying to go against it just makes the gameplay feel more rage-inducing than it should be. From how I felt as a first-hand experience and how the skills work in Payday 3 at launch in a loud gameplay perspective, the overall way I can describe it is that it just feeds into this toxic meta. With the big example being ammo funnel and replenish, offense is prioritized a lot more than any other defensive or support options out there. Besides the only grit skills that most people ran being a part of Enforcer that already gave more of an offensive benefit, Plate Up is the only skill that I could really put money on that most people were investing to take advantage of grit. There wasn't anything else consistent unless you wanted to lose a resource or, more importantly, a core buff. And without both Edge and Grit, I can't take advantage of any of the Enforcer perks that can range from faster reloads to more damage up close to even being immune to the stuns from things like shields and bulldozers. At least when you lose your buffs on command, you might still be able to play around it, but when your best skills have to be on a time limit, it can be hard to maintain them without forcing a habit. Even with combat reload, I still forget to reload my guns until it's too late. Losing your buffs not only can halt the overall feeling of combat, but even stealth isn't safe. Losing that rush can be the difference of either staying hidden or the alarm sounding off. Let me build up my rush again and just find her.
Sorry. Come back another time.
Give my rush, give my rush. Where's my rush? She's right there. Give me my rush. Give me rush!
Nope, you're not getting in.
Give me my fucking rush. Oh my god.
You're not on the lease.
What the fuck was that? The closest thing that was even considered as a viable support skill that benefited every player was just upgrading the armor bags so you can bring them to have a max of 6 charges. The ability to restore downs with medic bags only became a universal mechanic months after launch. And skills like steady hands and high grain were more or less skills that only benefited the player using them before they were changed to affect every teammate for their respective benefits. And hostage trading, although it was made better with the introduction of armor repair kits, the more skill points to invest into for more resources per hostage, and even the introduction of a completely new mechanic in the form of an overheal, it doesn't stop the fact that the first aid kits that you got from trading hostages at one point weren't going to help you peek around every corner, especially when armor was still the first line of your defense before your health was next. One more thing about hostage trading that pisses me off was the fact that they couldn't at least let manipulator skills that you invest into work on your teammates also. Even when console players can finally read the text chat, I still hate having to type in chat every time I join in a game telling people that I have hostage trading skills, only for them to completely ignore or not even read my message just for 5 repair kits per 2 hostages goes down to 1 because little Timmy on the fucking Xbox couldn't at least read the text on his CRT television while there's a faint humming sound coming from a vacuum cleaner through his headset mic. There's a dog barking too in the background, and you can also occasionally hear little Timmy screaming too because his dad's just using his arm as an ass. Oh my god, I wrote that. There felt like an illusion of choice when making different loadouts when most weapon skills were made to benefit every weapon type. And the only reason why I feel like a gun expert in Payday 3 wasn't because I enjoyed every second of gameplay, but it's because progression was locked behind using weapons I didn't want to. And most of my gameplay was just starting to boil down to just playing aim labs, but through a bathroom doorway. And when you start to realize things die more often when you use specific guns, then you're more inclined to bring those ones because they do the job better. When I started playing Payday 3 when it first came out, the only time I felt like I had actual power in this game was running these one-shot builds, and I hated every second of it. Not just because I felt like I was forced into a playstyle that I hated, and not just because there are mechanics built into this game that make gameplay feel more stressful than enjoyable, even when I wasn't playing on the overkill difficulty, but because I became more aware of how different and flawed the gunplay really is in this game compared to Payday 2. The shooter genre for the longest time have dominated the video game market, and almost every list that I've come across online, the shooter market has always been on the top, either as number one, or with the only few exceptions I could find, like websites like CTongue that rate it as a close second, when the number one genre by CTongue was Battle Royale, with the other shooters like Fortnite and PUBG as examples that they've used to their conclusion. And websites like Visual Capitalist put millennials and Gen Z's ranking shooters at the third most popular, but this is still putting into perspective that a likelihood of 53% of all gamers still play shooters, whether it be first person, third person, or just virtual reality. This still means that you could just flip a coin and the person that you might be talking to has at least played a game with a gun in it at some point. So you might be asking, what is the purpose of me just underlining the overall view of the shooter genre in the first place? That's because besides games being either in first or third person, the shooter part of any game is a lot more different on the surface and a lot more complicated than you might think. Like if your shots either come from the center of your screen or from the gun itself. Or in more extreme cases, if guns in certain games aren't hit scan, but are projectile based instead, meaning you not only have to line up your shots where someone is going to be, but you also have to account for distance and gravity as well, or else your shots will land on the ground. What can make a shooter vastly different besides hit scan or projectile guns is the recoil every weapon has. And knowing how your game's recoil mechanics work gives you not only a better advantage, but understanding of how combat is supposed to work in your game. Random spray is the most common and easiest to understand. Every first shot will always be accurate, but every other shot after the first shot will start to deviate from the center. The longer you hold down the button, the more the shots deviate, but the more you space out your shots, the more accurate they can become. Spray pattern recoil is unique in the sense that I don't even know any other game besides Counter-Strike that does this, but I still think it's very interesting. Every gun in the game has a unique spray pattern when you hold down the trigger and empty an entire mag, so if you remember the spray pattern of your gun, then the more likely your shots will land, especially when you ever have to just spray like your life depended on it. Camera movement will shoot your camera up the more you fire your guns, so if you don't want to shoot the wall or ceilings, then you have to fight against the recoil by gradually moving your aim more downward. Payday 2 actually does use two different methods of emulating recoil. I've modified two Car 4s in this game, one with the best stability and one with the best accuracy, but modded them to also have the worst of their opposing stats. From what you can see, Payday 2 has both random spray and camera movement as their main ways of emulating recoil. Random spray can be negated with more accuracy, while camera movement can be negated with more stability. But having these two firing modes isn't really as bad as you think. I had to go out of my way to modify these guns to give them the intentionally bad stats. The Car 4 is actually the best gun in terms of getting both accuracy and stability maxed out. Even when you're at max stability, you still have to drag your aim down like camera movement recoil, and granted it's a lot more manageable. And although accuracy is a stat that works as intended, many guns in Payday 2 make you choose either between a more accurate or more stable modifier. The only reason why I have close to the max stats for my Car 4 was because of the skill investment I had, so I can afford to make the gun more accurate. I will go into a little more detail about Payday 2's weapon modding soon, but for what it's worth, I felt like the shooting in Payday 2 was very satisfying. Payday 2's loud gameplay overall felt very fast-paced. Every action in this game just felt like second nature. The only time I felt like I wasn't having fun was either because I was using a bad build, or if the weapon I was using didn't have any good synergy. Let me reiterate. I have to intentionally shoot myself in the foot if I want to make myself suffer. Oh! I stepped in shit! Payday 2's gameplay loop is the main reason why I kept coming back to play this game even after all this years. Yeah, keep laughing up these hours, alright? And my 100% completion, alright? I loved every second of it. This game was probably a lot better than sex. It took me a while to really grasp what was wrong with the aiming in this game. It felt like a mishmash of other recoil mechanics. Trying to even understand it just feels just as confusing as that masculine urge to stick my cock into a moving fan blade. I can't be the only one. There's just something that is so... tempting about it. I had a feeling I knew what was wrong with the recoil, but I wasn't 100% sure yet, and the only reason why I felt this way, besides being trapped in a god-awful one-shot meta, where if I wasn't taking out enemies quickly, then the game was just practically unplayable. The main thing that stuck out to me like a sore thumb since launch was the mouse sensitivity. Even on max value, the sensitivity still felt lower than what I was used to in Payday 2. Actually, scratch that, it felt lower than any other game that I usually played on with high sensitivity. It was just another shitty setting restriction that I just had to thug out, but I didn't want to change how I played 99% of my other games, even if they weren't traditional shooters themselves. And having to play with two vastly different sensitivities for different games is problematic, especially when you have to make quick decisions. It's not like I'm Goku wearing weighted training gear in a PvE game, and the moment I boot up Fortnite, that's like taking them off, and I'm able to unleash my inner gamer. Even when I got used to the sensitivity, I still felt like my shots weren't as accurate to what I was actually shooting, especially when my main method of taking out enemies was to aim down the sight with every single interaction. I was just confused looking at a majority of my shots. They felt like they were either missing or hitting when I know they didn't feel like that at all, both in-game and looking back at the recording slowed down. I was kind of at an impasse for how I could describe how off the gunplay really was, but then I was almost certain I knew what happened when I got stunned by a shield without running the solid perk and kept firing while being stunned. I then tested it with multiple ways of stunning the player, and when you get stunned, your camera not only shakes, but your gun will also be misplaced for a few seconds. Your aim will not be accurate while you're still in this state, but the shots still fire where your gun is placed, and I decided to compare getting stunned in Payday 2 as a comparison. It might be hard to visualize even with a recording, but your aiming in this game doesn't actually bounce like in Payday 3 despite the camera moving away from the target. I even tested it with a sniper with only one shot in its clip, and I can confirm that there's only one problem that plagues Payday 3's aiming that I'm not a fan of. Payday 3 has physics-based recoil, which means your aim is directly tied to your gun's fucking animations. And I'm beginning to understand why they didn't want to make the base game sensitivity any higher, because if you could swerve your aim too quickly, then you're more likely to miss your shots, not because of bad aim, but because the gun itself can swerve off from the center of the screen. I have a theory for why they decided to remove the ability for every law enforcer to have a quick melee on command for whenever you get too close to them in Payday 3, and it's probably for this exact reason, so your aim doesn't get so fucked like you were just aiming down the sight with a Hyperion sniper rifle. The more I keep talking about recoil for every shooter, I feel like Alex Jones without the crisis actors, or just Adam Conover talking about how the ball moving gives women a disadvantage in basketball. Like, it's stupid. It sounds stupid. I understand. It's such a small thing to talk about, and honestly, the game has received enough changes to allow you to make more mistakes than you ever could at launch, so you don't have to always bring a one-shot build. But I still have a problem with physics-based recoil, and many of the changes made the combat to make it feel much worse than its predecessor. The only time I ever see a system like this work is either if the guns that you're using is in a virtual reality setting, or if the game in question was meant to make the shooting intentionally bad by design. The only time I ever see physics-based recoil be acceptable in a first-person shooter is if the game was built around having that added realism in the first place, and if the game was a player versus player setting. And besides Payday 3 being a player versus environment game where the only person's feelings I'm going to be hurting is the cloaker I just flashbanged when he tried to charge at me, it's the fact that this game is not what I really signed up for when I was initially playing Payday. Hopefully by the end I could at least prove to you guys what I mean, but it really does feel like a next-gen modern shooter hiding in a 4-player co-op's clothing. There has been one game or DLC that I can think of that has disappointed me for not being the game I originally wanted to play, and that's Fallout New Vegas' Dead Money DLC. I feel like most people don't like the fact that their maxed out characters felt more powerless in almost every scenario, especially when their heads just have a tendency to randomly explode. Yeah, kind of like that. Get this thing off of me!
This is the Washington Police Department. We have a warrant for your arrest. This has to be a dream. I'm probably just going to wake up like nothing ever happened. This is not a brain buster. You are wanted for reckless driving, murder, vehicular manslaughter, and grave robbing. I did not do that last one. Stealing a body from the morgue is close enough. You have 30 seconds to open the door before we open it for you. That clearly wasn't me. I never shit the bed. I don't have time to clean anyways. Searching for weapons. Yeah, touch me. I bet your wife is jealous. Touching my balls instead of her camel toe. All clear. The only thing to worry about is just the smell of shit in his pants. There's more where that came from. Of course we have a fucking comedian here. Is there anyone else in the building with you right now? There's not really anyone here with me. Wait a fucking minute. This isn't even real. You aren't real. You're not the only one who said that before. Let me guess. Are the demons in the room with us right now? Looks like we found your accomplice. I didn't even know someone was there. I thought you said no one else was inside the building. That's complicated. Someone broke into my house a few months ago, and all they have been doing is leaving written pieces of paper for me to find. Who the hell breaks into someone else's home and leaves notes around for you to see? The fuck should I know? All I know is my uncle should be in the morgue, and not in my shoe closet hanging. I think we're dealing with a job here. You fucking saw the door closed yourself with your own eyes, dipshit. I know there's a pool spring somewhere. This is not a haunted house, a fake one I mean. There's someone actually behind that door. Why don't you go inside and see what your little squatter looks like? If you let me go in by myself, you two will be dead. Are you threatening an officer of the law? This isn't a threat, this is a promise. You can either open the door, or we can just go to the precinct right now. I already know where this is going. This shit is too long. Oh my god, what the hell is that thing? We got a 1053 officer now. Go, stay back. I said stay back. Something doesn't feel right. I fucking knew it. Finally, a gun with some bullets. Oh my god, this place is a fucking mess. This painting feels off. It's almost too detailed. 。 . 。 . 。 . 。 . 。 . 。 . 。 . 。 . 。 . . 。 . 。 . 。 . 。 . 。 . 。 . 。 . 。 . 。 . 。 . 。 . 。 . 。 . 。 . 。 .
「 Going back to Payday 2, both in weapon modding and weapon stats, they're fairly easy enough to understand. If you want the weapon to perform better in combat, then just modify the weapon to increase their stats. The only time you would want to make your gun's accuracy and stability overall worse was because of concealment modifiers, either for stealth or for making dodge builds. And as much as I hated the concealment stat, in a loud gameplay perspective, it has probably a lot of valuable trade-offs. The reason why you would want to invest into concealment is for low blow to be able to crit, but only getting basic means you're not only limiting your overall weapon pool, but you're also intentionally making your guns a lot worse to handle. Acing low blow will not only give you a lot more leeway, but the trade-off being that you might be losing out on more valuable skills. Even if it's just 6 skill points, your playstyle can drastically change as a result. And I still haven't mentioned armor types yet, but for brevity's sake, the 2-piece suit was the most popular option for its highest concealment, its lack of a movement speed penalty, and its naturally highest dodge chance out of all armor types. Every weapon is unique and has their own different stat distributions that make it either easier or harder to max out a specific stat. I realize I'm just probably describing weapon modding for every game, like how I'm the first caveman that discovered how to make fire. So the same thing does apply to Payday 3, but when I mentioned the gunplay before felt more sluggish, it was because they really wanted to make the simplest of actions you did feel longer and clunky. Some of these actions that you can do in Payday 2, like weapon swapping, aiming down the sight, and even canceling sprint to fire your weapon, has been directly tied to a new stat called handling. And if your gun's handling stat is too low, then all these little minor inconveniences can start to add up in the worst possible scenarios. And it's confusing in a sense that many of the weapon mods you can put on may not or barely even increase handling as a stat. Sometimes it could say it increases 1 out of the 3 stats that handling buffs, but drops the other ones as well, but by how much? I don't know. Just like how I don't even know how the other mods are affecting my gun stats. Not only are they not telling me how much the stats go up and down, but sometimes it barely even changes the stats around, even on a new gun. The point of weapon modding is that the stat increases should be accumulating with other mods you've equipped, but when the changes are just a speck of green or red in the bar formation, that's a lot harder to read than an actual numerical value, then I have a lot less faith that the weapon modding in this game is actually changing any of my weapon stats at all. Hey, so this is a little trivia that I didn't actually know until doing the research for my video. Payday 2 originally had a similar way of displaying stats for the first year of its release, but this was obviously revamped shortly after, and I didn't even know about this until I saw a snip of an old menu system in the Payday live-action series before the game actually launched. But to quickly return to the stats, I'm even more confused on what stability does now when there's an actual recoil stat that exists in the game. That's because there isn't just vertical recoil to worry about, but horizontal as well. And I'd like to know what I could do to minimize these as much as possible, but it genuinely feels like the devs behind these decisions were just telling me to get good at a system without explaining. There's already skills in this game that don't inform you enough on what they add or trade off to your own build. And when the game just doesn't tell me what my guns are actually capable of doing, it genuinely feels like playing an old-ass NES game that just gives you little to no information to work with without looking up a guide. With the lack of information that the weapon mods have provided in my playthrough of the game, I didn't even notice that a handful of guns I've been using since launch had a negative targeting speed modifier attached to them. I didn't even know what this did until I looked it up in a video explaining how weapon mods for this game worked, and apparently targeting speed is just another way of saying ADS speed. Then just say that! You have a skill that refers it as ADS speed. Why do you have to name it something different in the weapon modding? And the video in question that I could find talking about every stat and mod came out almost a year after this game's release. Trust me, I was looking around. I couldn't find anything else earlier than that. It's almost like people weren't even interested in the game enough to learn its actual mechanics. Out of all the weapon stats that exist in this game, there's only one that is exclusive to the pump action shotgun called cycle speed. What this is supposed to do is that it's supposed to allow you to cock the shotgun faster, so it technically gives you a faster fire rate. But from a side-by-side testing with one that has cycle speed and doesn't, I hardly even notice a difference in speed, especially when I slow down the footage. I genuinely don't know if the stat itself is either bugged or if it does anything else in this game, because all I really have to work off of is some stupid name that I'm not even sure if real gun experts would even use this as part of their vocabulary or terminology. You know, like how there's a fear for everything on Earth? earth, and instead of just saying the phrase, I am afraid of, they just have to say it in some Latin word followed up by the word phobia. That's literally what I get from reading stat changes from almost every weapon mod. Most of the time it just feels like a guessing game, especially if the specific mods I'm looking for, like overall gun kick and spread, aren't on a majority of options available, even if I have all mods unlocked. At least it's better than having a fear for long words. Can you even pronounce that? Not even the damage stat is safe from this system. Modding a weapon like the SA rifle, I'm still calling it that, not my fault, has a CQC barrel mod that's supposed to drop your damage over distance. But why the fuck does your damage skyrocket as a result? As another example, there's a weapon that you can unlock at level 21 called the Northwest B9 assault rifle. Usually there's supposed to be some kind of expectation whenever you unlock a new weapon that's under the same category as another one. It's supposed to have one or two stats that stand out enough to make the gun unique. But when you compare the Northwest to the Car 4, the same gun that you start out with, it has nothing going on for it at all. In fact, the damage from its old weapon stats wasn't lying. Its damage output was overall worse for no acceptable trade-off. After people have decided to either mod the game or just look at the raw stats for every gun in the game files, the Northwest's raw damage is actually less than the Car 4's. It also had a slightly higher ammo pickup rate, but for how many bullets you were spending, even with the game having a generally lower ammo drop at launch, it could take 4 or 5 headshots before you took out one enemy, and it still would put you in the red in terms of how much ammo you used. And this was a very notable downgrade for the longest time. And one more funny thing about the Northwest rifle, it was promised to get a buff as early as January of 2024.
Saying that these two weapons are gonna get, like, worked on in the next patch doesn't mean that those are the only two weapons. We might look at, like, more of them.
Yeah.
But it only got a proper buff almost until the next year, when the first World Bank heist was implemented around December. I have went through every changelog prior, and the only thing they changed about the Northwest rifle was just giving it different fucking animations. It's like going to the dentist, but instead of them removing all that plaque and tar between your teeth, they just spray paint it white so you don't look British. The only mods that are directly affecting my weapon that's noticeable without constantly playtesting are both the sights and the magazine mods. But even then, like, how does this affect my reload speed? Like, Payday 2 already had this. Why is this a hidden stat on the menu? This is also another weird quirk that magazine mods have that I didn't know until reading the Fear of Greed patch notes of September 2024. Yeah, we've reached the next year. Any gun that has a magazine mod equipped can also affect the gun's ammo pickup rate. Most of the time, if you didn't have a magazine mod equipped, then your ammo pickup rate stays high. But if you had any of these mods equipped, whether it be a speed pull mag, an extended mag, or even the compact mag, this negatively affected your ammo pickup rate, and I don't understand why they couldn't afford at least telling the player that something like this can happen. Ammo pickup rate is a hidden stat in the previous game, and some mods can negatively impact this stat. And I hated this lack of information so much, and I was hoping that Payday 3 could at least be more upfront with me if specific mods will alter that stat. But it can't even do that as a simple task. If I were to try to summarize my problems with Payday 3's gunplay, is that it surprisingly makes simplicity its most complicated design flaw, and that's only just recoil and weapon modding. I still feel like I barely even touched on how much weapon bloom in this game feels almost comically bad without either crouching while hip firing or just aiming down the sight with almost every interaction. There was obviously skills for these things, but I feel like I was weighing my options between nice quality of life or literally just put this on every build you make. I have never played a traditional FPS game where I not only felt like my shots weren't accurate to what I was shooting, but it was just confirmed by looking at the recording slowed down. I don't understand why Payday 3's entire gimmick is trying to make the game more fair towards the bots than the actual players. Like, did I hear there like little feelings or something? Did the cloaker from the previous game go to the forums and bitch about how his headshot multiplier was higher than a fucking bulldozer's? That's not a joke, by the way, look that up. So just looking up the best snipers in the world, yeah, so I'm not trying to make the argument that I'm the next Simo Haya. Wait a minute. But if my aim doesn't properly line up with what I have to see, and if I have to go back to my recording only to see that I was as off as a failed assassination attempt, then I think I'm going to scrub my entire internet presence and then encrypt my phone so the FBI knows that this is a joke. This is a joke, okay? I feel perfectly fine and happy with my life. And even reloading your gun was a problem because there's different states of reload that your weapon can go under that the game will remember. It sounds good on paper, and it works much better for this game now, or at least when Payday 3 might still be playable, but for the first 7 or 8 months, if you think about just tapping the reload key and try to cancel the action, well, tough shit. I literally pressed reload like a second ago. I literally pressed reload a second ago and I still wanted to reload after I shot the shot. What the fuck? I know there isn't any good way of trying to visualize it in-game, even if I have the footage to show you, but just imagine trying to get like an ad on YouTube and letting it play out, and then you decide to pause the video after the ad finished, but the moment you decide to unpause the video, another fucking ad starts to play. That is literally how Payday 3 reloading worked at one point. As much as ammo funnel and replenish break the meta for this game, they still don't get a pass when you're able to replenish the mag with just one bullet left to take out an enemy. You still have to reload your gun. And the double barrel shotgun was the biggest victim of this the most, because you either get a kill on the first shot or be forced to reload on the second, and it didn't matter if ammo funnel put one more shell in. The only difference is that if you can manage to get a kill on the second shot, then you can at least proc combat reload. But you still have to make sure you don't walk over the other ammo drops, because doing so would have given you about the same exact reward as missing both your shots. What? I've reloaded my gun. It's like Schrodinger's cat had 3 possibilities of either being alive, deceased, or an ascended being across the cosmos. If we're on the same field talking about shotguns, there was only 2 back when the game first launched. The Mosconi, in my opinion, was the only usable one before paid DLC and the weapon balance around December 2024. The Renfield shotgun on paper can at least constantly refresh your buffs with combat reload, but besides it having considerably the second worst fire rate out of all weapons in this game, its one-shot potential is probably the worst in the game because of how inconsistent it is. Not only do you have to run face to face for the extra damage, but you weren't even guaranteed the kill because the pellets could still potentially miss. And the fun thing about shotguns taking out multiple enemies with just one shot wasn't really in this game like Payday 2. The fact that a shotgun out of all things had to be modified to be as accurate to be viable is by far the most foreign concept to me, especially when in the previous game you were encouraged to make them as inaccurate as possible. And if you thought that weapon modding or this bar formation isn't confusing enough, then I clearly haven't shown you some of your secondary options. Just look at the damage of 3 of these pistols in the menu versus in-game: the Model 11, the 44 revolver, and the Bison revolver. You can take your time to view these stats, but I'll still compare the discrepancies of each secondary as I go. The Model 11 is promoted to having the highest damage output out of all pistols, but it struggles in two-shotting just a regular SWAT. Meanwhile, I was comparing it with the 44 revolver, and I've noticed that this gun can reliably take down most enemies within just 1 or 2 shots. Maybe it's because the 44 has better handling than the Model 11, so the shots are more accurate, and the Model 11 has a bigger magazine size as a trade-off for being a less accurate gun. So I could see these guns work perfectly fine in a vacuum. Wait, are you fucking kidding me? This does... What? But then the Bison revolver just starts dominating in terms of damage instead, despite being promoted as the worst in terms of damage out of all 3 of the pistols. In fact, one more weird conundrum between these guns is that both revolvers can damage a shield before breaking the glass visors, but the Model 7 just struggles in even landing a stray shot like I'm in fucking San Francisco. That's until I looked it up and oh my fucking god, there's hidden stats for these guns! Fucking headshot multipliers and armor penetration? There are not 1 or 2, but 3 hidden stats that each gun has that dictates how much damage they are capable of dealing. Damage fall off is, I mean, it's almost in every game. The further you are, the less damage you deal per shot. But this is where it starts getting interesting. Headshot multiplier is also just kind of a weird stat, mostly because it's tied to damage fall off. Some guns have a great headshot multiplier within close range, but most if not all guns start to lose their damage even further, because not only do guns in this game start dealing less damage the further away they are from the target, but their headshot multiplier also suffers a damage penalty as well. The best way you can tell is by shooting a sniper. For some reason, snipers have only 40 health across all difficulties, but most of the time you wouldn't be able to get close enough to get the higher damage multiplier. If you look back at the Model 11 and its hidden stats and compare the damage fall off and headshot multiplier, without a simple damage buff, the gun can only deal up to 34 damage at most. most from a headshot from 100 meters. Comparing it with the revolvers and their stats, even within 100 meters, they shouldn't be able to take down a sniper in one shot without an outside source. But if you can still manage to hit headshot after headshot, the snipers can still go down in one shot. The reason of the discrepancy that the revolvers are able to one-shot a sniper versus the Model 11 is the final hidden stat that every gun has, and that's the armor penetration. For maybe the first 3 or 4 months of this game's release, I've been trying to wrap my head around how this stat works. But even trying to understand how armor penetration works is just still a very vague concept to me, that even trying to look up videos on YouTube on how it works, the only thing I really get is just people complaining about how the armor mechanics work. It's just... you cannot win. Armor penetration is not only a hidden stat that dictates the usefulness of every gun in the game, but it's the least documented stat. When you're going for body shots, enemies have a separate health pool similar to how your armor works. So before you can attack their health pool, you have to drain their armor first. Headshots don't deal any armor damage, so instead they deal their full damage output with their headshot multipliers to take into account, but you get the point. So why does armor penetration matter when performing headshots? Because the higher that gun's armor penetration also increases to their headshot damage. So going back to the revolvers, the reason why the 44 had trouble one-shotting versus the Bison was because its armor piercing was just a decimal point off. I'll fucking show you a decimal point off. Now, even with all this information put together, for me playing this game, even knowing how armor penetration works, something did feel a little bit off. Until I had to look up the information on Reddit, which I don't want to fucking look up anything on Reddit, to be honest. And there is one more catch to armor penetration. And even the Reddit post doesn't explain it correctly. Can't even afford antipsychotic meds in this economy. So this spreadsheet will tell you every single armor piercing value for every gun in the game. But it's still not accurate enough because every single enemy in this game has another hidden stat called armor hardness. And here are those values for every enemy in the game. And a large majority of enemies in this game have a value of 1.5. So you take that value, subtract it with any armor-piercing value of a gun that you're using, and that is the real armor-piercing value. Hello, this is me from the future after having an aneurysm trying to solve how armor penetration works in Payday 3. I'm not a math person, and I don't expect this to be 100% accurate, but if any of you whose jobs is to put numbers together, then please tell me if I'm doing it right, or if this is wrong. I cannot fucking fathom how much I've been looking at this and still trying to understand whether or not that I'm correct. So I just need an answer to this question, and that's why even go through that many hoops just to make the most complex system of damage I've ever seen? Why can't gun shoot and gun do damage? Is me brain damaged? What the fuck were they smoking when they made this stat? There is a huge lack of secondary diversity in this game, and the only options you were given at launch were just 6 different handguns, 2 of them just being the revolvers. The game didn't have a separate section for buying primaries and secondaries like in the previous game, and I assumed that I could at least purchase the SMGs as a secondary. And vice versa, I thought I could buy pistols in the primary slot so I can dual wield it like the Akimbos in the previous game. Like I'm Dante from the Devil May Cry series. Or I'm Lara Croft without the big tits and only ate McRibs for my diet. Or that guy from Borderlands. There are so many primary options that you only have room for maybe 2 or 3 reskins until you reach the maximum limit for primaries. Yes, you can buy more weapon slots, but this is the limit itself. Meanwhile, you can probably own every single pistol and still have some leftover slots before you start using C-stacks to buy more. In terms of actual usefulness on Loud besides the revolvers, every other option felt like they were both draining too much time and ammo just to take out a single enemy. Besides the Model 11 having no rights to a slower firing speed when the damage is not enough to one-shot, and the gun kick being just so over the top like I'm fighting the recoil of an actual gun. Or something like the starting pistol, the Signature 40. Its only saving grace is its accuracy, but that doesn't matter when I could empty an entire mag and it still wouldn't be able to take down anything. I'm still using extended mag in the footage, but for how many shots it takes to take down one SWAT, I don't want to imagine using the speed pull mag just to have less ammo in the clip. The Signature 403 is just a straight up upgrade as far as I've noticed from the 40. And the only good pistol is the Strike 7 because it has not only the highest ammo pool, but it also has the highest mag size with the extended mag mod, which in its own right feels like a stretch because even if you wanted to unlock the extended mag, then you have to level up the gun just by having it in your loadout. The Strike 7 is the only gun in my opinion that needs a specific mod to make it stand out more because something like the Signature 403 already has the same starting clip at 17, and it's more accurate after each subsequent shot. It doesn't help that the best builds in Payday 3 that everybody was running never required you to swap off from your primary in the first place. Whether it was from the insanely high ammo pickup rate or the fact that ammo funnel and replenish practically gave you an entire clip after every kill, it made you forget that you even had a secondary option at all. The lack of secondary diversity is painful, and I don't understand why they took this route. I mean, in Payday 2, you could have secondary choices from shotguns to even as recent as sniper rifles, and SMGs have been moved to the primary slot instead, which, honestly, I didn't have any faith moving SMGs to the primary slot would have worked, especially with this gun in particular. The Ziv Commando definitely went from being the worst gun in this game to one of the best after a single update, but before that could reach that point, you were hardly taking out just one enemy with a single clip. Besides SMGs, especially the Ziv for having the worst damage output in the game, SMGs back then had assault rifle ammo pickup when it took more than twice the amount of ammo to dispose of a single enemy. The Ziv and the other two SMGs that launched just drained so much ammo that I was practically using my revolvers as primaries instead and not the other way around. To some extent, I feel like within late development, they just wanted to switch the SMGs to the primary slot and just forgot how to balance it to make it more appropriate. If you wanted a general idea of what the Ziv Commando's damage was like at launch, try to equip the Tribune 32 and try not to swap away from it. It's a new automatic pistol that was added for free in the Houston Breakout update. Because this gun is a secondary, it's not that bad of an option to bring, and something like the ammo economy has gotten a lot better, especially when every gun now doesn't start with half of the max ammo they can bring. Even if the SMGs are mostly dog shit in this game, I could tell you right now that I haven't even scraped the bottom of the barrel yet, because not only is this gun so bad in comparison to other guns in Payday 3,
I just fucking shot myself!
but even using this gun makes me question why they have to make the gunplay feel so fucking clunky compared to Payday 2. That being the Renfield Sniper Rifle. The Renfield Sniper just marks everything wrong with this game. This gun can one-tap heavy SWAT units, so it should be in par with other S-tier guns, right? So why is it low on the C tier? Heck, why am I not even editing this tier list right now to put this dog shit underneath the Ziv Commando? This gun has the worst fire rate in the game. If you miss one shot, it'll take too much time before you can fire again. And compared to the competition, all other guns in the S tier have two things in common: their high damage output and their fast fire rate. The SA rifle is a gun that you can unlock even before the Renfield rifle, but severely outclasses it simply because of the faster fire rate and the mag size. So if you did miss that first shot, you had enough time to readjust yourself to get the headshot in the next one. Even if you did land your shots with the Renfield rifle, every one kill you could have gotten with this gun, you could get 3 kills with the SA. But that's not even the weird part. This gun by design is given its even slower fire rate when you're scoping. Why the fuck is hip firing faster with the rifle? Also, I want to know who on the team thought that bolt actions in Payday 2 needed this change.
I don't think we're like punishing players enough that they're using a sniper rifle in a PvE game. So let's just take this scope and just smash it on their face.
You can see that I keep unscoping every time I take a shot. And that's exactly what it looks like, because this is the only gun in the game that has this weird quirk. Not even the Red Fox Sniper has this, and you can unlock this thing 13 levels before you get the Renfield. Even when I don't land all my shots, I need to swap to my secondary to finish off my opponent. The Renfield highlights one of the dumbest mechanics they added into this game. Remember when I said that this game remembers what state you're currently reloading your gun? So why does this have to be applicable towards the Renfield, you might be asking? because of the bolt action fucking animation. So you don't even have to reload to feel the same effect. You just have to shoot, and you have to commit to the next shot with the gun too. Even if I wanted to make this gun more bearable for me, I realized there's just a huge lack of mods that could have made the gun much better. Angled sights acted as iron sights for snipers without having to sacrifice their long-range potential, but the mods and those mechanics don't exist in Payday 3 yet. And having to choose a different sight to work with is just another pain in the ass. I'm a simple man and I want a red dot on this small scope, but instead I gotta work with this weird circle crosshair that I'm just not a fan of. Yeah, there is a red dot scope, but besides that being unlocked as one of the last mods you can get for the rifle, it has a downside of a slower weapon swap speed. Although I didn't know how much of an impact this would have, I still wanted to steer clear away from it because I was afraid of any negative impact this would have. Half of the time I need to swap to my secondary, not because I can't land my shots or the fact that I'm running out of ammo, but because it's very easy to get overwhelmed just by not being able to shoot every 1.5 seconds. Even when I wanted to use other scopes, I feel like my vision just gets clogged up so much. I feel like the tunnel vision's so bad that by the time I unscope, I would just be the white girl on the couch surrounded by 5 black dudes. You know the meme. Out of all the weapon mods that are not in Payday 3, I really wish they kept crosshair customization because everyone has a different preference. Sometimes even those preferences can be different depending on the gun. And not having that can lock players out of certain playstyles that they would prefer. Even if I didn't like the marksman playstyle that this game had to enforce at launch, I still had to worry about how much ammo I was spending to finish off just one enemy. Besides ammo pickup being a lot lower in the early life of this game, every time you started a heist before the Fear and Greed DLC dropped, you only started with half of your max reserve ammo for both guns that you can bring. If there was still a form of dealing damage that wasn't tied to a resource like a reliable melee option, then ammo wouldn't really be so scarce, especially when you don't have the skill points invested for it. But melee in this game is just so goddamn neutered that they might as well have just taken the 2 back legs from it too.
Look how they mess with my boy.
It's too slow, it has a very short range. Half the time I feel like I'm better off just shooting or finishing a reload just to get enemies off of me. And the biggest problem I have with quick melee, besides the lack of variety from the previous game, is just its non-existent damage. The only possible reason I can think of why melee doesn't deal any damage is because that would just completely invalidate ever using the new takedown mechanic to deal with guards without a suppressor. I just joined this lobby, dude. I just joined this fucking lobby. I understand the reasoning behind it, but it feels very arbitrary. Not even having any other melee options or skills makes the system feel like a last-minute addition. I don't think anyone wants to be in a scenario where they not only run out of armor and ammo, but their whole trio of bots or players are either downed or in custody. Or sometimes I can't even revive them because of a bug that doesn't allow you to interact with anything in the game, and it's been in there for God knows how long. And slightly off topic, but I literally experienced this bug just from playing the tutorial when I first bought the game.
Now set up a zip line. It's an easy way to move bags or yourself quickly.
Got it.
Where did I drop the grenade? What? Oh. Oh. What? What? Wait. What? If there is a god, then there must have been some kind of divine intervention that I just so happened to get one of the most annoying bugs within the first 5 minutes of gameplay after purchasing this game on launch. Back to what I was talking about before, I feel like there needs to be a system in place that still allows you to deal damage even when all your resources are gone. It makes no sense to me why something like the quick melee or possibly a handful of other mechanics that I may or may not have talked about yet that were implemented as early as the first Payday in 2011 did them right, while Payday 3 is just trying to add too many spins to the point where it just spins out of control and creates a fucking natural disaster. So I know I barely even touched upon the grenades and the final gadget you can bring on loud, so this is going to be a little bit of a lightning round before I talk about Payday 3's biggest gimmick being the overkill weapons. Frag grenades have received the biggest change in Payday 2, allowing you to cook them before you throw them at your intended target, but the self-damage can break an armor chunk if not thrown far enough, unless you are running Blast Shield to tank the explosion and Enforcer to refresh grit immediately when getting the close range kills. My biggest gripe with frag grenades, besides there being a better option, was the fact that this is the only throwable that has an actual cook timer. The smoke and the flashbangs still have a set time after you throw them, and it disappoints me that a cook mechanic was only really exclusive to one throwable until they added in another one in the future update. The smoke grenades weren't just confusing, but they felt severely outclassed when you unlock flashbangs a lot earlier. The reason why I say they're confusing is because a perk deck like Sicario that existed in the previous game encouraged you to stand in the middle of the smoke grenade's gas to get its buffs, while in Payday 3 you have to throw the grenade at the enemies to give them an accuracy debuff instead. The smoke grenades have gotten a lot better after the introduction of the Assassin perk branch and buffs to strategists allowing you to mark enemies in the smoke clouds, but nothing beats the viability and consistency as the flashbangs. You don't have to make flashbangs any better besides getting Scrounger to make them a reusable asset. If you were getting overran by enemies, this was basically your panic button. Frag grenades may not kill most enemies in a group that you throw it in, but when you throw a flashbang, that means that you're able to easily land more headshots on enemies that are standing still. In fact, there's another broken build that I might argue even rivals Ammo Funnel and Replenish that exists as early as launch. Besides obviously using Scrounger, Instaflash used the combination of Overcooked to allow all your throwables to detonate on impact, including flashbangs, and Expose will make all stunned enemies lose their armor, including armor hardness. If you're wondering why I'm not screaming, no, this is not an AI generated voice. I was currently having a mental breakdown while recording this. You can even use flashbangs to grab SWAT units as hostages immediately, but if you don't have the solid perk, then the SWAT unit you just grabbed will promptly begin to shoot at you when he's freed. One more advantage that flashbangs can offer is that whenever you're not running insta-flash, if you hear a cloaker charging you, you can set up a flashbang around your feet, so if he gets close enough to incapacitate you, you're able to free yourself almost immediately. And this was your only method of getting a cloaker off of you reliably without an outside source. Infrasonic mines are the only loud applicable gadget you can bring, and honestly, they suck when compared to the flashbangs. Besides the stun not being similar enough to allow you to grab a human shield, and the fact that you can only have a total of 5 per heist without it being rechargeable, it requires a lot of setup. Mainly because the range itself requires you to be up close to the surface you want to put this on. It's not something you can use in the moment without your armor getting shredded, and I've stopped using them entirely because of one exact moment of them failing to trigger when I wanted them to. No thank you, no thank you. I thought I stunned! Where's my stun? One of the core game elements that separates Payday the Heist on the surface is the ability to bring 3 guns with you in a heist: a primary, a secondary, and a handgun. Unfortunately, the secondary choices did range from just 1 shotgun to 2 SMGs, but the most used secondary in Payday the Heist was actually just a grenade launcher from the only DLC available, because not only was it the best crowd control that you had access to, and throwables didn't exist in this game, but it was the best answer for dealing with enemies like shields. In fact, the large majority of Payday 2's best weapons for crowd control and shields on the surface aren't just the grenade launchers, but are these big, flashy weapons that you have no right to be bringing on a simple bank heist. Payday 3, besides obviously keeping primaries, had wanted to make handguns mandatory to bring as your second weapon of choice. And overkill weapons were meant to fill in this void. Not only can you still have the option to bring a big, flashy gun, no matter what build you were running, but you aren't allowed to have access to it until you reach a certain point into the heist. Either by a combination of taking out roughly 100 enemies or doing the objective. With how the game is structured, you more or less are guaranteed to be able to call your overkill weapon roughly when the heavy SWAT units start to spawn. And I fucking hate it. I hate it so much. Were they trying to copy like fucking Call of Duty or some shit, like with like the kill streak airstrikes or something? Like, I don't understand, but this fucking sucks. Why is this, oh my god.
Dallas has gone down.
This fucking grenade launcher sucks, man. It genuinely sucks. You started out with a grenade launcher that used to deal too much damage to you than it did to the actual enemies in this game. A large part of it has to do with how wide the range actually is versus the actual particle effect. The radius is so big that it's very easy to accidentally blow up other environmental explosives on the map, which can still deal even more self-damage to the actual player, because environmental explosives are one of the few cases where your health gets attacked directly. It's really funny to me when you think about this. If you wanted to deal more damage with this thing, you had to land direct hits, but what is the purpose if I can't take cover from the blast when I needed line of sight in the first place to deal more damage? This was fixed 2 months after launch, so the self-damage was nerfed to only dealing 20% to the actual player, but you still had to fire this thing far enough away so you didn't reset your armor recovery or break a segment off of your armor without even realizing. You had to use the same skills you use with frag grenades to minimize the self-damage, but it's insulting that you had to make more of an investment towards this when it's literally not only half of your available options for almost a year, but you had to get to level 40 to even access the other option. It adds even more insult to injury that bulldozers are immune to explosives, and that includes the starting grenade launcher. It did nothing. The only other option you had was the Red Fox sniper rifle, and for some ungodly reason, I personally believe this thing had much more crowd control potential than the grenade launcher, and it doesn't even have to include any possible buffs. Although you don't have much AoE with the sniper, the penetration this gun has in the thermal vision just to better line up the shots for collaterals is much better of a crowd control weapon than the fucking grenade launcher. Also, it kills anything with just one shot except for bulldozers. That only takes 2 shots if you aim center of map. And people are going to say that I'm complaining, I'm schizophrenic. I'm clearly making up things. The hip firing in this game is perfectly fine as it is. It's fine.
I don't know, Doctor. I think Payday 3 is just a shitty game.
Cool Gamer ran over a crowd of children for Pokemon cards. I did have one problem with the Red Fox, but it wasn't really viability. There were plenty of problems already built into the overkill system as is, but from an actual usable gun perspective, it was great for getting rid of special units. But can someone really explain to me, like on the dev team, why they thought it was a good idea to make the scope just make everything look untextured with a crystal meth filter? I'm also never going to understand why they use the logo for the Talibu Raza achievement in the previous game as an actual indicator. Like, the logo itself is very misleading to where the actual enemy's hurt boxes are. I'm definitely a lot happier now that that's not the case anymore, especially changing the thermal logo into a simple, small rectangular box. It kind of reminds me a lot of how Railgunner's scope works in Risk of Rain 2. I could have been making a Risk of Rain video instead of this shit. I don't know why I put myself through this. But even when you have to outweigh your options on the only 2 overkill weapons you should be bringing... Calling your overkill weapon can drop in the most inconvenient spots sometimes, just like in Golden Shark Bank. Sometimes the chopper can drop it on the roof, and by the time you have your overkill weapon ready, you're either close to opening the vault door or already moving the loot to the escape on the roof. Or Bile could just be a piece of shit and just drop it right in front of the bank's entrance. Or it could be even as useless for the drop in the nightclub heist. Like, no matter what, it'll also drop at the front entrance also, despite the fact that Bile could just drop it in the middle of the fucking dance floor where you're supposed to build the cage and escape on loud.
Cloaker's dead!
Also, if your teammate brings a different overkill weapon, then you wouldn't have any idea what it could be until you open the kit and it's the fucking launcher. Before Payday 3 launched, I thought that the overkill weapon system had a lot of potential. I've seen the few beta footage before launch using them, and I thought they could at least define the entirety of Payday 3's balance at least. Even if armor eventually would run out, the idea that you can at least have a much better offensive pressure in the later parts of the heist did intrigue me. But the biggest problem that plagued the system, in my opinion, was just the same exact disappointment I had to go through while just playing the tutorial. Be fucking likey, dude. Wait, so I have 3 weapons now? Oh, what? Aww. Now, if you've never played this game before or don't even know what I'm just hyperfixating about, do you want to know what made me feel very disappointed? Swapping to any of your guns will just drop your overkill weapon. I had to wait patiently to get it. Heck, I had to fight through an entire horde of SWAT units in the first place, far enough from the actual objectives, and I just drop it like an unsupervised child. Ammo for the overkill weapons can't even be replenished with ammo drops or ammo bags, and I thought this was already a pretty balanced system, but I guess Payday 3 needs another level of extra realism. It just, I'm trying so hard to hold it in, but I can just feel I'm on the verge of a manic episode. If overkill weapons were something that you could just pull out on demand after picking them up from the case, that would be the only change in my opinion that would fix them. And the only reason why they suck is because they require too much commitment to even make them work when you already have 2 other guns at your disposal. That's what I get for shooting. If there's something I'll never understand is the reasoning why overkill weapons were even considered to be implemented in this game when there was only 2 options to choose from, especially when there's a plethora of different choices they could have grabbed from Payday 2. Why were miniguns and LMGs not on the drawing table? What about RPGs? The Hailstorm was one of my favorite guns added back in 2022. Why not have a gun that has different firing modes? Why not change the portable saw to make it a more viable melee option? What about Elon Musk's fucking flamethrower? Not a flamethrower, despite the fact that it works exactly like a fucking flamethrower. There's flame particles already when you shoot the explosive barrels, and that's at least halfway done already. The grenade launcher itself already looks like it was taken from the previous game with the short barrel and speculator sight mods attached. So I don't understand why a weapon added in 2015 was reused and other more recent weapons weren't even considered. I'll even gladly take the Bulldozer's drum mag shotgun instead. Like, how come nobody in the Payday gang didn't think it would just be a great idea to steal a Bulldozer's gun from its corpse and just started blasting? Why even promote a feature like overkill weapons when you have more heisters to choose from than the actual fucking new feature itself? My final gripe with overkill weapons, besides being dropped in less convenient spots, is the fact that whenever my teammate is calling their weapon, I can't even call in my own weapon until a few seconds after the chopper drops his weapon onto the map. This entire feature was made to show how much more advanced or modern the Payday franchise has become over the years, and you're telling me that the devs can at least be bothered to make some kind of queue system for the weapons to be dropped sooner, instead of me either forgetting to call it 10 minutes later from originally getting it, or just constantly spamming my phone like an ADHD gremlin. If I still had to wait for the weapon to drop, can I at least choose where the valid spot would be to deliver the weapon so it doesn't get dropped in the middle of the street far enough away from both the objective and my teammates? You know how pre-planning in Payday 2 was before the heist starts? You can select an asset and most of them can be placed on specific spots on the map. Literally just do that with overkill weapons, but in the middle of the game. Oh, and of course overkill weapons as a system have finally changed. How long did it... Oh, of course it was more than a year of... I think I should stop taking my antidepressants.
Ready? Oh yeah, baby, come on, let's do this, let's go!
Before I go over the special units, I at least want to go over the regular SWAT units briefly because a lot about them has changed since Payday 2. Sometimes whenever you miss a shot, they'll actually try to dodge to make your next shots harder to land. This wasn't Payday 2, but this was tied to a stat called Threat, and most of the time whenever enemies dodged, they probably were going to die anyways because of how fast-paced Payday 2 really was as a game. Half of the time you won't